This is Beat Hacker, a game I made in 48 hours for the Game Maker's Toolkit Game Jam. In this video, I'll share how I made it, including my goals for this project and a few of the unique coding challenges I faced. First, real quick, a note on the state of Mondovi right now, just for some context. On June 30th, I released Breezy, my commercial project of 2 years. Sales are pretty much abysmal right now, which is why I plan to update and relaunch the game in a few months, as I mentioned in the last video. Since release though, I've not really touched the game, instead working on a new prototype for a beat-em-up platformer. You might have seen some of the videos that I've been posting on Twitter, X. This jam was a nice break in the middle of that project. As an Eastern Time Zone normie, the jam started at 1 PM on Friday for me. That would give me Friday afternoon, all of Saturday, and Sunday morning to work on the game. Unfortunately for me, I had work from 3 to 7 PM on Friday and Saturday, as well as church on Sunday. I calculated that I would have 6.5 hours to come up with ideas, that includes my time working on Friday, and 10.5 hours to actually create the game. Not ideal, but I've made games with less time. With the itinerary in place, it was time to come up with an idea. Eventually, when 1 PM rolled around and I heard the theme, it went something like this.
Rolls.
Aha, rolls. Maybe I could do some sort of action game where you only move by dodge rolling. Or maybe rolls like a stage play where you have to act out a story. Perhaps something about rollback netcode, like a game where you intentionally lag a game to sneak up behind your enemy.
Reversed. I wanted to see games.
Oh, I probably should have waited until he said the whole thing. Well, I don't imagine any of those ideas would fit. Okay, maybe it didn't go exactly like that, but my first idea really was that rollback netcode thing. For game jams, I try to make a different genre of game each time. Since 2019, I've made platformers, roguelikes, Zelda-likes, Strand-type games, and even a dating sim. For this jam, I decided it was finally time to try my hand at making a rhythm game. Except, rhythm games have a lot of things to get right. Song choice, note placement, leniency, progression, difficulty. Wouldn't it be so much easier not to have to deal with all that? Hey, wait a minute. How about I make I had this idea about 105, so I didn't necessarily need those 6.5 hours to think of others. However, I still tried to come up with other possibilities in the back of my mind. As I did so, though, I also started fleshing out this reverse rhythm idea, and the pieces were fitting together nicely. I've had this idea for a really long time about an RPG where you can turn instruments into people and they would act as your party members. Maybe, thought naive me, this will be the opportunity to make that dream a reality. I was beginning to architect a grand vision in my mind. I'd call it Beat Hacker, a game where you explore a dungeon, find hidden instruments/people, and serenade them to recruit them into your party. Our heroine would be Anna, the analog synthesizer. With her wit and bravery, and the player's cunning, perhaps she could take on the most formidable opponents. Slowly though, I began to scale that idea back. Spending time at work, and thus away from the computer, forced me to rethink my expectations. Perhaps instead of an RPG, I could reuse a visual novel approach from my last game, Valentine's Day. That would let me inject a little lore and humor while still being manageable and allowing me to spend most of my time working on the song editor. Eventually I went with this pared back idea. I would need 2 components, a song editor and a dialogue system. So, once I got back from work on Friday, I made a new Unity project and started on the song editor. But you see, I had a bit of a secondary challenge for myself this jam. As I mentioned, I've just finished a project of 2 years, and part of the reason it took so long was because the code was just awful to work with. For this jam, I wanted to challenge myself to create clean, straightforward, and modular code, as much as possible. Luckily, the basic plan for the song editor was pretty straightforward. I created a song class with properties for a beats per minute, a length, and 3 instruments, a lead, a bass, and a beat. Each of those instruments would have a track you could place notes on. I also created a song maker script that would cycle through these tracks and spawn the placeable notes. When you clicked on a note, it would toggle on or off. Finally, I created a function that would have all the notes save their data to the track so that the song could be played or exported. I programmed most of this on Friday night, but eventually I got a little sleepy, and I knew better than to code while tired. So instead I pulled up GarageBand and came up with this funky background song for the visual novel segments. I figured that if people were tempted to skip through the dialogue, they might at least stay to hear the music. Sparing a few more details though, I got the song editor done by Saturday morning. According to this progress tweet I tweeted on X. Oh yeah, I have an X by the way, so follow me on X. Isn't this great? Once I got done with the song editor, it was time for the dialogue system. I knew that implementing dialogue might be tricky, so I decided to keep the features to a bare minimum. Just 2 portraits, some text, and the background music. I created a class called Dialogue to control these segments, It contains a list of what I call dialogue segments, individual events that would affect the state of the game. The most obvious one was to put text on the screen and wait until the user inputted a key to move on. I also needed one to change the portrait sprites, open the song editor with a given song, and evaluate the song you made. It took a little trial and error, but I got the basics working. The first encounter in the game was this fellow named Clappy, who was just a sentient pair of arms. He seems to be in charge of this funk dungeon, as it's called. Clappy tells you the reason you're in here, and asks you to make a quick song as a test. As long as you place at least one note, he lets you move on, unlocking his claps as a beat instrument. Also, since I didn't have time to make any others, his claps are your only beat instrument. This seems like a simple encounter, but since I was using it to test the dialogue system, it actually took a while. Once I had finished it though, I was ready to move on to other, more interesting characters. Next up was Tony, whose inner instrument was an electric guitar, although he also unlocks a bass guitar. He asks you to create a bass line and beat for his guitar solo. I didn't really have any ideas for his personality, so I just had him use outdated slang, since that's always in fashion. Tony's requirement for your song is a little more involved than Clappy's. He wants a fire bass line, which I interpreted as having a lot of notes in the bass track. Tony was pretty quick, so I had just enough time to add Olivia, whose inner instrument was a cello, but once again she also unlocks a grand piano for the lead. Olivia asks you to play a melody over the strains of her cello. She's got a bit of an unhinged personality, but that's kind of to be expected after being trapped inside the funk dungeon with only Tony and Clappy to talk to. She also has the oddly specific requirement of including a fair amount of triads in your melody. This was mostly because I wanted players to experiment with actual chords. Just disregard the fact that I only gave them 7 notes to make those chords with. You can still make some heat in the key of C major. Once Tony and Olivia were done though, I had to wrap things up. I threw together a quick title screen and added a little flair through a script that occasionally glitches out the letters. Then it was time to build. I waited about 15 minutes for the initial web build, but then came the moment of truth. Would there be game-breaking bugs at the 11th hour? To my surprise, no. A couple of resolution issues, sure, but those were a 10-second fix in Unity. I started talking with Clappy, made him a satisfactory song, and nothing seemed wrong. Same with Tony, I sped through his dialogue and there's the game-breaking bug. Clappy and Olivia both worked perfectly, but for some reason, Tony's guitar solo refused to load. To this day, I still don't really know why that's the case. I suspect it's an issue with the Track Factory scriptable object I was using refusing to save across scenes, but that wouldn't explain. Anyway, there's no time for that. I managed to salvage Tony's sick solo with a little hard coding, and no one will ever notice it. That's good enough for me. I did one final build, zipped and uploaded it, and went to sleep. Generally, the initial feedback I got was positive, a little constructive criticism, and a lot of enjoyment. The main issues seemed to be with the song editor UI, which I expected, but it seemed that everyone was able to operate it. Looking at the rating distribution, it seems like the majority of my ratings were positive, although the amount of 1-star ratings was surprising, considering I didn't see any of those sentiments in the reviews. In the end, though, I don't really care about the ratings. How did I do on that coding challenge? All in all, I think I succeeded at my self-imposed clean code requirement. Sure, there were some aspects I messed up, and that hard coding near the end is downright nasty, but I mostly held it together. Importantly, if not for the cleaner code, I probably wouldn't have been able to implement that fix in the first place. Of course, I can't prove that, but the fact that I knew where everything was really helped. So that's my GMTK Jam 2023 experience. If you're still watching, there's a chance you might actually care about this channel, so I've got a little update for you. My next video will probably be about this elusive beat-em-up prototype I've been Xing about. After that, I'll be doing some more month-long prototypes like that, working on random non-game dev projects like programming languages, and updating Breezy to prepare for the relaunch. I'm not going to pressure myself to start working on another commercial game anytime soon. I'll just coast along for however long I feel like it, at least game dev-wise. So you really won't know what to expect on the channel, because I don't know what to expect. With that being the case then, all I can say is, maybe tune in. Oh, and also, have a good day.